In this section, we're going to be basically just putting together everything that we've just learned about factoring. So here they're going to throw problems at us, and we're just going to have to figure out exactly which of the strategies would work best. Okay, so here's our first problem. It says 2x squared minus 12x minus 144. Now, if you'll remember from everything we've been doing so far, our first rule of factoring is always to pull out a greatest common factor. So, in this case, the greatest common factor would be, let me get my pen to working here, we have a 2 in common for each of these terms. So I'm going to factor out this 2 to begin with. So when I factor that out, or kind of reverse distribution, we're going to be left with a trinomial that is x squared minus 6x minus 72. Now remember, we can always check this by distributing back. We should be able to distribute that 2 and get right back to where we started. Now we factored out the GCF, but we still have this trinomial here. And because there are 3 terms, we need to see if it will factor down a little more. So when we have 3 terms and the first coefficient is a 1, then we factor by trial and error. So I'm going to put my parentheses in. We're going to break up the x squared into x times x. And now we have to think of 2 factors of 72 that will somehow give us a 6 when we add or subtract them. So I'm going to come over here to the side and figure that out. Let's see, 72 would be 1 times 72, but that won't work. 2 times 36, but that won't give us a 6. 3 times 24, that won't work. 4 times 18, but that won't work. That would give us a 14 if we were to subtract it. Okay, 5 won't go into it. 6 times 12 is 72. And look, 6 and 12, when we subtract those, we do get a 6. So that tells us that our factoring is going to have to be a minus 12 and a plus 6 in order to get negative 72 when we multiply, and negative 12 and positive 6 would give us a negative 6 for the middle term. Now don't forget, we factored out that 2 earlier, so we have to continue bringing that down. But this is the way that that would factor. Hey, let's look at another one here. Here we have negative 3y squared plus 27. And again, no matter what else we do, our first rule of factoring is always to pull out the greatest common factor. So in this case, we actually have a 3 that's in common for both of these terms. And because this first term is a negative, I'm going to go ahead and factor out a negative 3, just so we can have that first term positive. So when we pull out the negative 3, or reverse distribute, then we'll be left with y squared minus 9. Now again, remember, you can always check yourself by distributing it back through. You should get right back to where you started. Now the negative 3 is done. We factored that part. But the y squared minus 9 might factor down more. Here we have 2 terms, so we need to think about what strategies we have for 2 terms. For 2 terms, we can factor out, we can factor a difference of squares or a sum or difference of cubes. These are both perfect squares. And this is a difference. Remember, that's very important. It has to be a subtraction of 2 squares in order to fit the pattern. So when we factor this down, this will factor into y plus 3 and y minus 3. Don't forget, we have to pull down that negative 3 that we already factored out. So our final answer would be this.